Step into the art of Poirot, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot masters the craft of mystery.
In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream pierces the night. A man lies dead, poisoned, a letter opener in his chest, a cryptic note whispering of a debt unpaid. Who betrayed Sir Reginald Ashford? Was it his fearful wife hiding a ghostly vision, his defiant daughter guarding a secret love, or a stranger from a past that refuses to stay buried? Join Hercule Poirot, the master of mysteries, as he unravels a web of lies, vengeance, and shocking twists in this chilling tale of murder. Will the truth save the innocent, or doom another to fall? Listen now, if you dare, to Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot's novel Secrets and Surprising Twists. Chapter 1. The Arrival of Blackthorn Manor. In the waning light of a crisp October afternoon in 1934, the countryside of Kent unfolded in a patchwork of amber and russet, as though the earth itself had donned an autumnal cloak. The train from London, its steam curling like a ghostly signature against the sky, rattled to a stop at the modest station of Thornfield Halt. Among the handful of passengers who disembarked was a small, fastidious figure, impeccably dressed, his moustache waxed to perfection, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dust of travel. This was Hercule Poirot, the celebrated Belgian detective whose reputation for unraveling the most tangled of human enigmas preceded him like a shadow. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional chronicler, stood beside him, clutching a leather valise and squinting into the distance. "I say, Poirot," Hastings remarked, adjusting his hat against the chill. "This place feels deucedly remote, hardly the spot for a weekend jaunt, what?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled with amusement. "Mon ami, it is not the jaunt that brings us to Blackthorn Manor. It is the summons of Lady Beatrice Ashford. When a woman of her stature requests the presence of Hercule Poirot, it is not for the pleasure of his company alone. There is, I suspect, a matter most delicate, and perhaps most sinister." The invitation had arrived 2 days prior, penned in Lady Ashford's elegant hand, requesting Poirot's attendance at her ancestral home for a weekend gathering. The letter hinted at unease, a shadow of trouble within her family, though it was maddeningly vague. Poirot, ever intrigued by the unspoken, had accepted at once, dragging a reluctant Hastings along for what he called the exercise of the little grey cells. A sleek Rolls-Royce awaited them at the station, driven by a taciturn chauffeur named Perkins, who tipped his cap but offered no conversation. The drive to Blackthorn Manor wound through lanes flanked by ancient oaks, their gnarled branches forming a canopy that seemed to whisper secrets. The manor itself, when it came into view, was a grand Elizabethan pile, its stone facade softened by ivy, its mullioned windows catching the last glimmers of daylight. Yet there was an air of melancholy about it, as though the house itself bore the weight of untold stories. They were greeted at the door by Lady Beatrice herself, a tall woman in her late 50s, her silver hair swept into a chignon, her eyes sharp but shadowed with worry. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice low and cultured. "I am most grateful you've come. I fear this weekend may not be as restful as I had hoped." "Madame," Poirot replied, bowing slightly, "it is the unrest that interests me. Pray, tell me, what is the nature of your concern?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, glancing at the footman who hovered nearby. "Not here," she murmured. "Tonight, after dinner, we shall speak privately. For now, allow me to introduce you to the others." The others were an eclectic group, gathered in the oak-panelled drawing room where a fire crackled in the hearth. Lady Beatrice's family and guests, it seemed, were a microcosm of English society, each with their own distinct air of charm or discontent. First was Sir Reginald Ashford, Lady Beatrice's younger brother, a ruddy-faced man in his early 50s, whose hearty laugh belied a nervous twitch in his hands. His wife, Clara, was a pale, delicate woman with a penchant for wringing her hands and glancing anxiously at her husband. Their daughter, Evelyn Ashford, was a striking young woman of 25, her auburn hair pinned loosely, her green eyes darting with a restlessness that suggested secrets. She was engaged to Major Charles Rutherford, a handsome military man with a clipped moustache and a manner that was both gallant and guarded. Beside them stood Dr. Lionel Hargreaves, the family physician, a lean man with a scholarly air and spectacles that glinted in the firelight. His wife, Margaret, was a quiet, mousy woman who seemed perpetually startled by her own presence. Then there was Victor Crane, a solicitor from London, whose sharp features and sharper tongue suggested a man accustomed to wielding influence. His companion, Miss Lillian Vale, was a novelist of some repute, her dark eyes observing the room with the intensity of one who collected stories, and perhaps secrets. Finally, there was Mrs. Dorothy Winthrop, Lady Beatrice's widowed cousin, whose penchant for gossip was matched only by her fondness for sherry. Dinner was a formal affair, served in a dining room adorned with portraits of stern Ashford ancestors. The conversation was polite but strained, punctuated by Sir Reginald's booming anecdotes and Miss Vale's wry observations. Poirot, seated between Lady Beatrice and Evelyn, said little but observed much. He noted the way Clara Ashford's hand trembled as she lifted her wineglass, the fleeting glance of anger Victor Crane shot at Major Rutherford, and the way Dr. Hargreaves's fingers lingered on his wife's wrist, as though checking her tension here. Can't quite put my finger on it. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The tension, mon ami, is the prelude to the drama. In a house such as this, where wealth, pride, and secrets mingle, something is bound to erupt. After dinner, the party retired to the drawing room for coffee and liqueurs. Lady Beatrice drew Poirot aside, leading him to a small study lined with books and lit by a single lamp. Hastings followed, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Beatrice began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I fear for my family. There have been incidents, threats, anonymous letters, and a sense of malice I cannot explain. My brother, Reginald, is in financial trouble, though he denies it. Evelyn, my niece, is hiding something about her engagement. And Victor Crane, well, he has been asking questions about the estate. Questions that unsettle me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And these letters, madame, what do they say?" "They speak of betrayal," she replied, producing a folded sheet from her pocket. "This one arrived yesterday. It says, 'The past will bury you all.'" Poirot unfolded the letter, his fingers tracing the jagged script. "Curieux," he murmured. "The hand is disguised, but the intent is clear. Someone wishes to frighten or perhaps to warn." Before he could say more, a piercing scream shattered the silence. It came from the drawing room, followed by a crash of glass. Hastings bolted toward the sound, Poirot following with measured steps. They found the guests in disarray, Clara Ashford clutching her throat, her face ashen. On the floor lay a shattered decanter, its contents pooling like blood on the carpet. "What happened?" Hastings demanded. Clara's voice trembled. I saw someone at the window. A face, pale and horrible, staring in." The guests crowded to the French windows, but the terrace beyond was empty, the night swallowing any trace of an intruder. Poirot knelt by the shattered decanter, his gloved fingers brushing the glass. "Interesting," he said softly. "The decanter was full, yet it fell from the table. An accident? Or a message?" As the guests murmured in confusion, Poirot's gaze swept the room, cataloguing every expression, every gesture. The little grey cells, he knew, were already at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that had only just begun to form. Thus began the weekend at Blackthorn Manor, where beneath the veneer of civility, a storm of secrets was brewing. Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, sensed that the scream was but the opening note of a far darker symphony. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. Danger, but cannot yet name it. Hercule Poirot, ever the observer, sat in the morning room with a cup of tisane, his eyes scanning the faces of those gathered for breakfast. Captain Hastings, seated across from him, buttered his toast with more vigour than necessary, his brow furrowed. "I say, Poirot," Hastings whispered, leaning closer. "That scream last night gave me the shivers. Do you think it was really just a trick of the light, as Sir Reginald suggested? Clara seemed positively terrified." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sure sign of his mental gears turning. "Mon ami, the eyes may deceive, but the heart does not. Madame Clara saw something or someone that struck fear into her soul. Whether it was a face at the window or a projection of her own guilt, that is what we must discover." Breakfast was a subdued affair, served in a dining room that seemed too grand for the strained silence. Lady Beatrice presided with her usual grace, but her hands betrayed a slight tremble as she poured tea. Sir Reginald, red-faced and jovial, attempted to lighten the mood with a story about a fox hunt, but his laughter rang hollow. Evelyn Ashford, her auburn hair catching the light, picked at her food, her eyes darting toward Major Rutherford, who sat stiffly, his military bearing unbroken, but his expression guarded. Dr. Hargreaves and his wife, Margaret, spoke little, though the doctor's spectacles glinted as he studied the room. Victor Crane, the solicitor, scribbled notes in a small leather book, while Miss Lillian Vale, the novelist, watched him with a faint, enigmatic smile. Mrs. Dorothy Winthrop, her sherry glass conspicuously absent, fanned herself with a lace handkerchief, muttering about the chill. As the meal concluded, a sharp cry echoed from the upper floors, shattering the fragile calm. The guests froze, forks clattering against plates. Lady Beatrice rose, her face pale. "That came from the east wing," she said, her voice tight. "Quickly, we must see." Poirot and Hastings followed as the party hurried up the grand staircase, their footsteps muffled by the thick Persian runner. The cry had come from the direction of the family's private quarters, and as they reached the landing, they found Clara Ashford standing in the doorway of her bedroom, her hands pressed to her mouth. On the floor before her lay Sir Reginald Ashford, his robust frame crumpled like a discarded marionette, a dark stain spreading across the Aubusson carpet. A silver letter opener, its handle ornate with the Ashford crest, protruded from his chest. "Good Lord!" "Disturb the curtains." Lady Beatrice swayed, clutching the doorframe. "Reginald, my brother," she whispered. Evelyn rushed to her side, her face a mask of shock, while Major Rutherford stood rigid, his jaw clenched. Dr. Hargreaves stepped forward, his medical instincts overriding his hesitation. "Let me examine him," he said, kneeling beside Hastings. After a brief inspection, he looked up, his face grim. "He's been dead, no more than an hour. The wound is precise, but the letter opener, it's not the cause. There's too little blood. I suspect poison, followed by this theatrical flourish." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. The bedroom was opulent, with heavy drapes, a four-poster bed, and a mahogany desk cluttered with papers. A glass of brandy sat on the nightstand, its contents half drunk. Poirot bent to sniff it, his nose wrinkling. "A faint bitterness," he murmured. "Perhaps the vehicle for the poison, n'est-ce pas?" The guests, now crowded in the doorway, murmured in horror and suspicion. Victor Crane's sharp voice cut through the din. "This is monstrous. Who could have done this? We were all at breakfast." "Indeed," Poirot said, straightening, "and yet someone found the opportunity. We must establish the timeline. Hastings, my friend, fetch the household staff. We shall need their statements." As Hastings hurried off, Poirot began his meticulous examination of the scene. He noted the position of Sir Reginald's body, sprawled near the desk, one hand clutching a crumpled letter. Carefully, Poirot extracted it, revealing a single line in the same jagged script as the anonymous note Lady Beatrice had shown him. "The debt is due." He slipped the letter into his pocket, his expression unreadable. The staff, summoned by Hastings, gathered in the corridor. Perkins, the chauffeur, Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, and two maids, Jenny and Rose. Each claimed to have been occupied with morning duties, none admitting to seeing Sir Reginald after he left the breakfast table at 9. Poirot listened, his head tilted, his eyes missing nothing. "And you, Madame Clara," he said, turning to the trembling woman, "when did you last see your husband?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Just before breakfast. He said he had a headache and went to lie down. I thought nothing of it. He often overindulged in brandy the night before." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the way her hands twisted her handkerchief. "And the letter opener, it is a family heirloom, no?" "Yes," Lady Beatrice interjected. "It's kept on the desk in the library. Anyone could have taken it." "Anyone," Poirot echoed, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet, not everyone would have reason to place it in a dead man's chest." The police were summoned, ordering the body removed and the room sealed. But Poirot, undeterred, requested permission to question the guests. Grayson, grudgingly impressed by Poirot's reputation, agreed, provided he could observe. The interviews began in the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes. Poirot sat behind the desk, the letter opener's usual place marked by a faint ring in the dust. Each guest was questioned in turn, their alibis meticulously recorded. Lady Beatrice, in the morning room, writing letters, from 8:30 to 9:15. Clara Ashford, at breakfast until 9, then in her sitting room, alone. Evelyn Ashford, with Major Rutherford in the garden from 8:45 to 9:10. Major Rutherford confirmed Evelyn's alibi, claiming they discussed wedding plans. Dr. Hargreaves, in his room, reviewing medical journals, from 8 to 9:15. Margaret Hargreaves, with her husband reading. Victor Crane, in the billiard room, drafting legal documents, alone. Lillian Vale, writing in her room, with no witnesses. Mrs. Winthrop, in the conservatory, tending to orchids, from 8:30 to 9:20. Poirot noted the times, his pencil moving with precision. "Curieux," he said to Hastings as the last guest left. "Every alibi is neat, yet none overlap perfectly. And the letter, the debt is due. It suggests a motive rooted in the past, no?" Hastings frowned. "Debt? You think Sir Reginald owed someone money? That Crane fellow seemed awfully interested in the estate last night." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "But a debt need not be financial. It may be a debt of honor, of betrayal, or of blood. We shall see." As the day wore on, the manor's atmosphere grew heavier, the guests avoiding one another's eyes. Poirot, undaunted, continued his observations, noting a torn cuff on Major Rutherford's jacket, a smudge of ink on Victor Crane's fingers, and the way Lillian Vale's pen scratched furiously in her notebook. The little grey cells, he knew, were gathering the threads of a tapestry that would soon reveal its grim design. Chapter 3. The Belgian Detective's Entrance. The afternoon at Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with the weight of Sir Reginald Ashford's death, the air thick with suspicion and unspoken accusations. The grand house, with its tapestried walls and creaking floors, seemed to hold its breath as if awaiting the next act in a tragedy yet to unfold. Hercule Poirot, however, was not one to be swayed by atmosphere alone. His methodical mind, sharp as the edge of the letter opener found in Sir Reginald's chest, was already at work, sifting through the fragments of the morning's grim discovery. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood by the library window, peering out at the manicured lawns where a light of one of Miss Vale's novels. Poirot, seated at the library desk, adjusted his tie with a precise flick of his fingers. Mon ami, life often imitates art, but it is the truth that Hercule Poirot seeks. The poison, the letter opener, the note, these are not mere theatrics. They are signposts pointing to a mind both cunning and desperate. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Grayson, his walrus moustache bristling with authority. "Monsieur Poirot," he said gruffly, "I have had my men search the grounds. No sign of an intruder, and the staff's alibis hold for now. Looks like an inside job. Care to share what you've gleaned from your little methods?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with amusement, though his expression remained grave. "Inspector, the methods of Hercule Poirot are not so little. They are the product of observation, logic, and the understanding of the human heart. I propose we begin by examining the movements of the household this morning, with your permission, of course." Grayson grunted, clearly torn between skepticism and curiosity. "Go on then, but don't expect me to chase after every wild theory." Poirot inclined his head, a gesture of deference that masked his quiet confidence. "Alors, let us proceed. I wish to speak again with the family and guests, but first, I would examine the scene of the crime once more. There is much to learn from the silent witnesses, the room, the objects, the very air." The East Wing bedroom where Sir Reginald had met his end was cordoned off, but Poirot, with Grayson's reluctant approval, was granted access. The room was much as they had left it, the four-poster bed neatly made, the brandy glass on the nightstand, the desk cluttered with papers. The open window, however, drew Poirot's attention. He approached it, his gloved hands tracing the frame. "Curieux," he murmured. "The latch is stiff, yet it was opened with ease. And see, Hastings, a faint scratch on the sill, recent, I think." Hastings peered over his shoulder. "You think someone climbed in? But the drop is steep and there's no ladder." "Not climbed, perhaps," Poirot replied, "but something was passed through, or someone wished us to believe so." He turned to the desk, where the crumpled letter, "The debt is due," had been found. The papers scattered there included bills, a ledger, and a half-finished letter in Sir Reginald's hand, addressed to Victor Crane. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read it silently, then slipped it into his pocket with a murmured, "Most interesting." Returning to the library, Poirot requested the presence of the household, one by one, for what he called a conversation of clarity. Inspector Grayson stood by the fireplace, his notebook open, while Hastings took a seat near Poirot, ready to jot down observations. First was Lady opposite him. "I cannot fathom who would do this to my brother. He was not a perfect man, but he was family." "Madame," Poirot replied, his tone gentle but probing. "You spoke of financial troubles. Were these known to others in the household?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. "Reginald was reckless with money. Investments gone wrong, debts to unsavory lenders. He confided in me, but I urged him to keep it from Clara and Evelyn. They had enough worries." "And Victor Crane?" Poirot asked. "He is a solicitor, no? Did he advise your brother?" "He did," she admitted. "But Reginald was secretive, even with Mr. Crane. I sensed tension between them recently, though I know not why." Next came Clara Ashford, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling. "I loved my husband," she said before Poirot could ask a question. "I know people thought him brash, but he was kind to me. I can't believe anyone here would—" Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Poirot's voice was soft, almost hypnotic. "Madame, you saw a face at the window last night. Can you describe it?" Clara shuddered. "It was pale, almost ghostly. I couldn't see clearly. It was gone in an instant. But it terrified me." Poirot nodded, his eyes flicking to Hastings, who scribbled furiously. "And this morning you were alone after breakfast. Did you hear anything unusual before you found your husband?" "Nothing," she whispered. "Just the usual sounds of the house, creaks, footsteps. Nothing out of the ordinary." Evelyn Ashford followed, her auburn hair loose now, her green eyes defiant. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Monsieur Poirot," she said, crossing her arms. "I was with Charles, Major Rutherford, in the garden. We didn't see father after breakfast." "And yet," Poirot said, leaning forward, "you seem troubled, mademoiselle. Is there something you wish to share? A secret, perhaps, about your engagement?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she shook her head. "That's personal. It has nothing to do with this." Major Rutherford, when questioned, was brisk and military in his responses. "I was with Evelyn, as she said. We walked the rose garden, discussed our future. Sir Reginald was a good man, but he had enemies. Debts, you know. Nasty business." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Enemies, Major? Can you name them?" Rutherford hesitated, then shrugged. "Not specifically. Just a sense. He was always talking about investments, partnerships gone sour." Dr. Hargreaves and his wife Margaret were questioned together, at the doctor's insistence. "We were in our room," features set in a guarded expression. "I was working in the billiard room," he said. "Legal matters for Sir Reginald. Nothing unusual." "And the letter in his hand?" Poirot asked, producing the crumpled note. "It was addressed to you, Monsieur Crane? What debt was due?" Crane's eyes flickered, but he recovered quickly. "I don't know. Sir Reginald owed money to several parties. He was vague about the details. Lillian Vale, the novelist, was the last to be questioned. Her dark eyes met Poirot's with a hint of amusement. "I was writing, Monsieur Poirot. A murder mystery, ironically. I heard nothing, saw nothing. But I will say this house is full of stories, and not all of them are pleasant." As the interviews concluded, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Hastings," he said softly, "we have a puzzle with many pieces, but they do not yet fit. The poison, the letter opener, the note, all point to a crime planned with care, yet executed with passion. We must look deeper." That evening, as the guests dined in somber silence, Poirot's mind churned. He noted the way Evelyn avoided her mother's gaze, the way Crane's pen scratched restlessly, and the way Dr. Hargreaves's hand lingered on his wife's arm. The little grey cells were at work, and the shadow of truth was beginning to emerge from the mist. Chapter 4. The Threads of Suspicion. The second day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of the house. The mist that had cloaked the grounds the previous evening lingered, wrapping the Elizabethan estate in a shroud of grey that mirrored the mood within. Sir Reginald Ashford's death had cast a long shadow, and the guests, though bound by decorum, moved with the wariness of those who know they are watched. Hercule Poirot, however, was in his element, his sharp eyes and sharper mind cataloguing every glance, every gesture, as he sought the truth hidden beneath the surface of civility. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but increasingly restless, paced the library where Poirot had set up his temporary headquarters. "I don't like it, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "Everyone's on edge, and that Inspector Grayson keeps glaring at us as if we're the ones who did it. Have you made any sense of this yet?" Poirot, seated at the desk with a notebook open before him, adjusted his pince-nez and smiled faintly. "Mon ami, the sense is there, but it is like a tapestry viewed from the wrong side, all threads and knots. We must turn it over, Hastings, to see the pattern. And for that, we must question, observe, and listen to the silences as much as the words." The morning was devoted to Poirot's methods, agreed to let him lead the questioning, provided he could sit in and take notes. The library, with its heavy drapes and shelves of leather-bound books, became a stage for Poirot's subtle interrogations. First to be summoned was Evelyn Ashford, whose auburn hair was pinned tightly today, as if to mirror the restraint in her demeanour. She sat opposite Poirot, her green eyes wary but defiant. "Monsieur Poirot," she began before he could speak, "I've told you all I know. Charles and I were in the garden when it happened." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his quiet amusement. "Mademoiselle, it is not only what you know that interests me, but what you feel. Your father, he was a man of strong character, oui? Did he approve of your engagement to Major Rutherford?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, and her fingers tightened on the armrest. "He had reservations. Father wanted me to marry someone with more financial stability. But Charles is a good man, and I love him." "And yet," Poirot said, leaning forward, "there is something you conceal. A letter, perhaps, or a conversation overheard?" Evelyn's eyes widened, but she shook her head. "You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot. I have nothing to hide." Poirot let her go, but his gaze lingered on the door as she left. "She hides something, Hastings," he murmured. "Not the murder, perhaps, but a secret that weighs heavily." Next came Major Charles Rutherford, his military bearing as crisp as his tailored jacket, though Poirot noted a faint tear at the cuff, now mended but still visible. "Major," Poirot began, his voice soft, "you spoke of Sir Reginald's enemies. Were you among them? Did he oppose your marriage to his daughter?" Rutherford's jaw tightened. "He didn't oppose it outright, but he made it clear he thought I wasn't good enough. Said I was a penniless soldier chasing Evelyn's inheritance. We argued, yes, but I didn't kill him." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this argument, when did it occur?" "2 nights ago," Rutherford admitted. "In the billiard room after dinner. Voices were raised, but it was nothing more." Poirot nodded, making a note. "And the brandy glass in Sir Reginald's room, did you see him drink from it that morning?" Rutherford frowned. "No, I was with Evelyn. I told you that." The interviews continued, each guest revealing fragments of their lives under Poirot's relentless scrutiny. Dr. Lionel Hargreaves, the family physician, was calm but evasive when asked about Sir Reginald's health. He was robust despite his habit until after he was found. "The brandy, perhaps, but I'd need to test it." Margaret Hargreaves, questioned separately, was a nervous shadow of her husband, her hands futtering like trapped birds. "I don't know anything," she said repeatedly. "I was with Lionel, reading. I never saw Sir Reginald that morning." Victor Crane, the solicitor, was more forthcoming, though his sharp eyes betrayed a wariness. "Sir Reginald owed money to several creditors," he said, his voice clipped. "I was trying to help him consolidate his debts, but he was resistant. He mentioned a personal obligation he couldn't discuss." Poirot's pencil paused. A personal obligation? To whom? Crane shrugged. He wouldn't say. I assumed it was tied to his investments. Miss Lillian Vale, the novelist, was the last to be questioned, her dark eyes meeting Poirot's with a mixture of curiosity and defiance. "You're building a story, Monsieur Poirot," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "But I wonder if you see the real plot. This house is full of shadows, old grudges, hidden loves, debts unpaid." "And you, mademoiselle?" Poirot replied. "What do you see? A novelist observes, no?" Lillian's smile faded. "I see people, pretending to be what they're not. But I didn't see who killed Sir Reginald, if that's what you're asking." As the interviews concluded, Poirot retired to the morning room with Hastings and Inspector Grayson. He spread out his notes, along with a rough sketch of the east wing, marking the positions of the bedroom, the window, and the desk. "Observe, Hastings," he said, tapping the sketch. "The poison was likely in the brandy, administered before breakfast. The letter opener, placed after death, suggests a desire to confuse or mislead. But why? To point to an outsider, or to hide the true method?" Grayson snorted. "You're making it complicated, Poirot. Someone slipped him poison, then staged the stabbing. Clara's the obvious suspect. She was his wife, had access to the brandy." Poirot shook his head. "No, Inspector. The obvious is rarely the truth. Clara's fear is genuine, but her secret is not murder. We must look to the motives: money, love, revenge. And the note, 'The debt is due.' It is the key." That afternoon, Poirot requested a tour of the grounds, accompanied by Hastings and Perkins, the chauffeur. The terrace outside the east wing revealed little. No footprints, no signs of a ladder, but Poirot paused by a flower bed where a single rose lay crushed, its petals scattered. "Interesting," he murmured, pocketing a petal. "The rose does not fall so neatly." Back in the library, Poirot examined the brandy decanter from the drawing room, which had been replaced after Clara's fright. A faint residue in the glass caught his eye, and he sent it to Grayson for a "Why, that is the heart of the matter." As evening fell, the guests gathered for dinner, their faces drawn, their conversations stilted. Poirot, seated beside Lady Beatrice, noted the way Evelyn's hand trembled as she reached for her glass, the way Rutherford's eyes followed her, and the way Crane's pen never left his hand. The little grey cells were weaving a pattern, and though the threads were still tangled, Poirot felt the truth drawing closer, like a shadow moving across the manor's ancient walls. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The third morning at Blackthorn Manor brought with it a sky heavy with the threat of rain, the clouds pressing low over the estate like a lid on a simmering pot. The tension within the house had thickened, each guest moving with the guarded precision of those who know they are suspects in a murder. Hercule Poirot, however, remained unruffled, his patent leather shoes gleaming as he sipped his morning tisane in the library, his notebook open before him. Captain Hastings, less composed, fidgeted in an armchair, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting another scream to pierce the silence. "I say, Poirot," Hastings ventured, "this case is getting under my skin. Everyone's pointing fingers, and that Inspector Grayson seems convinced Clara did it. She's the grieving widow, for heaven's sake. Surely you don't think she's guilty." Poirot's moustache curved in a faint smile. "Mon ami, the obvious is a trap, laid by the cunning to ensnare the unwary. Madame Clara is not the murderer, but she is not without secrets. No, we must look beyond the surface to the red herrings that swim in these murky waters." Inspector Grayson's arrival interrupted their conversation, his walrus moustache bristling with impatience. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, brandishing a report, "the lab results are in. The brandy glass from Sir Reginald's room contained traces of cyanide. Quick acting, deadly. And the decanter in the drawing room, same stuff. Someone's been tampering with the liquor." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Cyanide, you say? A poison most theatrical, yet precise. It suggests a mind both bold and calculating. And the letter opener, Inspector. Any fingerprints? Grayson shook his head. Wiped clean. Whoever staged the stabbing was careful. But I'm telling you, Clara had the means. Access to the brandy, knowledge of his habits. And that scream last night sounds like a guilty conscience to me. Poirot steepled his fingers. No, Inspector. The scream was fear, not guilt. But let us test your theory. Bring Madame Clara to us, s'il vous plaît. Clara Ashford entered the library, her pale face drawn, her hands clutching a lace handkerchief. She sat, her eyes avoiding Grayson's stern gaze. Poirot, however, eyes widened, and she shook her head vehemently. No, I swear, I didn't touch it. Reginald always poured his own brandy. He kept a decanter in his room. He said it helped him sleep. And the decanter in the drawing room? Poirot pressed. You were near it when it fell, were you not? I was, she stammered. But I didn't touch it before it fell. I saw that face at the window and I panicked. I knocked it over by accident. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, madame. You may go. As Clara left, Hastings leaned forward. You don't really think she's innocent, do you? She's got no alibi, and she was right there when the decanter smashed. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Hastings, you see the fish, but not the net. Clara is a red herring, placed to distract us. The poison was in both decanters, suggesting a plan broader than one man's death. We must look to the others. Determined to unravel the tangle of motives, Poirot requested a private meeting with Lady Beatrice in her study. The room, lined with family portraits and heavy with the scent of old leather, seemed to hold the weight of generations. Lady Beatrice sat behind her desk, her silver hair impeccable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Madame, Poirot began, your brother's death is tied to a debt, as the note suggests, but I sense it is not merely financial. There is a secret in this house, one that binds you all. Will you share it with Hercule Poirot? Lady Beatrice's lips tightened. There are family matters, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald was not always discreet in his youth. There were scandals. Debts, yes, but also promises broken. Hearts wounded. I tried to shield Evelyn from it, but she's heard whispers. And these whispers, Poirot said, do they involve Major Rutherford? Or perhaps Victor Crane? Lady Beatrice hesitated, then shook her head. I cannot say. But Victor has been pressing Reginald about the estate's future. He claims it's for legal clarity, but I wonder. Poirot made a mental note, then shifted his focus to the grounds. Accompanied by Hastings, he revisited the terrace outside the east wing, where the crushed rose had caught his attention the previous day. The flower bed was undisturbed, save for that single bloom, and Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the soil. Observe, Hastings, he said, pointing to a faint indentation. A footprint, perhaps, but too shallow for a man's weight. A woman, or someone light on their feet. Hastings frowned. You think someone was out here, tampering with the window? Perhaps, Poirot replied. Or perhaps they wished us to think so. Another red herring to divert.
About your engagement?
Rutherford's jaw clenched. He insulted me, called me a fortune hunter. I told him I loved Evelyn, not her money. He laughed, said I'd never get a penny of his estate. And the tear in your cuff? Poirot asked, his tone mild. It was fresh yesterday, now mended. How did it happen? Rutherford flushed. I caught it on a rosebush in the garden. Clumsy of me. Poirot nodded, but his eyes were sharp. Merci, Major. That will be all. As the day progressed, Poirot's inquiries grew more pointed. He questioned Dr. Hargreaves about cyanide, noting the doctor's access to medical supplies. Hargreaves was indignant, claiming his supplies were locked away, but Poirot observed a nervous twitch in his fingers. Margaret Hargreaves, when questioned, seemed on the verge of tears, her answers vague and repetitive. Victor Crane, the solicitor, was next, his sharp features set in a mask of professionalism. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot said, "you were drafting documents for Sir Reginald. Were they related to his debts?" Crane's eyes narrowed. "Partially. He wanted to revise his will, but he was vague about the details. Said he needed to settle things first." "And the letter addressed to you?" Poirot asked, producing the crumpled note. "What did he mean by the debt is due?" Crane shrugged, but his fingers tightened on his pen. "I assumed it was financial. He owed thousands, you know." Lillian Vale, the novelist, was the last to be questioned, her dark eyes meeting Poirot's with a spark of challenge. "You're circling, Monsieur Poirot," she said, "but you haven't found the heart of the story yet. Sir Reginald was a man who collected enemies, as others collect stamps." "And you, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, "what enemies have you observed?" Lillian smiled faintly. "I observe everything, but I don't tell tales. Not yet." As evening fell, Poirot retreated to the library, his notebook now filled with timelines, alibis, and contradictions. "Hastings," he said, "the red herrings are many, but the truth is close. The poison, the letter opener, the note, they are distractions, yes, but they also point to a motive rooted in the past. We must dig deeper, mon ami, into the secrets of Blackthorn Manor." The rain began to fall, pattering against the windows, as Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, unravelling the threads of a crime that was both calculated and cruel. Chapter 6. A clue in the details. The rain that had threatened Blackthorn Manor all morning finally broke, drumming against the ancient windows with a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of suspicion within. The house, with its eyes, gleamed with the intensity of a man who had glimpsed the first threads of truth amid a tangle of deception. Captain Hastings, pacing, as was his habit when perplexed, stopped by the fireplace, where a low blaze fought the damp chill. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with frustration, "we've questioned everyone twice over, and we're no closer to the truth. Cyanide in the brandy, a staged stabbing, cryptic notes. It's all so confoundedly theatrical. Are you sure we're not chasing shadows?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Mon ami, shadows are cast by something real. The theatrics, as you call them, are not mere flourishes. They are clues, deliberate and precise. Today we shall focus on the details, for it is in the smallest inconsistencies that the truth reveals itself." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Inspector Grayson, his walrus moustache drooping slightly from the damp. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, brandishing a telegram, "the coroner's preliminary report confirms cyanide as the cause of death, administered within an hour of Sir Reginald's demise, likely through the brandy. No other wounds, so the letter opener was indeed a ruse. Any theories, or are you still playing your guessing game?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained courteous. "Inspector, Hercule Poirot does not guess. He observes, he deduces, he knows. The letter opener, the note, the cyanide, these are not random. They are the work of a mind that plans, yet falters under pressure. I propose we examine the scene once more, with particular attention to the smallest details." Grayson grunted, but acquiesced, and the trio made their way to the East Wing bedroom, now sealed but accessible with the inspector's key. The room was unchanged, save for the absence of Sir Reginald's body. The brandy glass remained on the nightstand, its contents now removed for analysis. The open window, with its stiff latch and faint scratch, drew Poirot's attention once more. He knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the sill. "Hastings," he said, "observe this scratch. It is shallow, precise, as if made by a tool, not a foot. And see, a trace of green paint, barely visible." Hastings squinted. "Green paint? From what? The window frame is white." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice soft but triumphant. "It is a clue, mon ami. One that does not belong. We must find its source." Poirot turned his attention to the desk, where the crumpled letter, "The debt is due," had been found. Among the scattered papers, he discovered a small appointment book, its pages filled with Sir Reginald's scrawled notes. One entry, dated 2 days prior, caught his eye. "Meet V.C." Leaving the room, Poirot requested a private meeting with Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, whose steady presence had gone largely unnoticed amid the chaos. She entered the library, her apron crisp, her grey hair pulled tightly back. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but guarded, "I've told the inspector all I know. I was in the kitchen from 8 until the scream." Poirot's smile was disarming. "Madame Ellis, it is not what you saw, but what you noticed. The household, its routines, its secrets. Sir Reginald, he was a man of habits, oui? Did he keep anything unusual in his room?" Mrs. Ellis hesitated, then nodded. "He kept a small box, locked, in his desk drawer. I saw it when I dusted, but I never opened it. He was particular about his privacy." "And the brandy decanter?" Poirot asked. "Who filled it?" "I did, sir, the evening before, from the cellar stock. It was sealed, as always." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Sealed, you say? Yet the cyanide was found in both decanters. Tell me, madame, have you noticed anything out of place in the house? A tool, perhaps, with green paint?" Mrs. Ellis frowned, then nodded slowly. "There's a garden trowel missing from the shed. It had a green handle. I thought one of the maids misplaced it." "Merci," Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. To Hastings, he added, "The trowel, Hastings. It is the key to the window. Someone used it to pry the latch, leaving the paint and the scratch. A small detail, but it speaks volumes." Poirot's next move was to inspect the garden shed, a small structure behind the manor, its door ajar. Inside, among rakes and spades, he found no trowel, but a faint smear of green paint on the workbench confirmed his suspicion. "The trowel was taken," he said, "used to stage an intrusion, then hidden or discarded. We must search the grounds." The search, conducted with Grayson's men, yielded nothing, until Poirot paused by a small pond near the rose garden. There, half submerged in the mud, was a trowel with a green handle, its blade scratched. Poirot retrieved it, wrapping it in his handkerchief. "Voilà," he said, "the tool of deception. But whose hand wielded it?" Back in the library, Poirot summoned Victor Crane, whose sharp features were set in a mask of impatience. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot began, "Sir Reginald's appointment book notes a meeting with V.C. Note. They point to a plan, but also to a mistake. Someone acted in haste, leaving these traces." As the afternoon waned, Poirot requested a private word with Evelyn Ashford. She entered the library, her auburn hair loose, her green eyes wary. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said. "You have been less than forthcoming. Your father opposed your engagement, oui? Was there another suitor, perhaps one he favored?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed. "There was someone years ago. A man father liked, but I didn't. It's irrelevant now." "Is it?" Poirot asked, his tone gentle but firm. "The past, mademoiselle, has a way of returning. Tell me his name." Evelyn hesitated, then whispered, "Edward Langley. He's gone now. Left England years ago." Poirot nodded, making a mental note. "Merci. That will be all." As evening approached, the guests gathered for a tense dinner, their eyes avoiding one another. Poirot, seated beside Lady Beatrice, noted the way Evelyn's hand trembled, the way Rutherford's jaw clenched, and the way Crane's pen scratched restlessly in his notebook. The trowel, the paint, the appointment book. These were the details that would unravel the mystery, and Poirot's little grey cells were weaving them into a pattern that was almost, but not yet, complete. Chapter 7. The Lies Unravelled. The fourth day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a relentless drizzle, the rain tapping against the windows like a Morse code of secrets yet to be decoded. The atmosphere within the grand Elizabethan house had grown stifling, each guest moving with the cautious deliberation of those who know they are entangled in a web of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, however, remained a beacon of calm precision, his patent leather shoes gleaming as he sat in the library, his notebook open, his green eyes scanning the pages where every detail, every contradiction was meticulously recorded. Captain Hastings, ever the barometer of the household's tension, paced before the fireplace, his hands thrust deep into his pockets. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with exasperation. "This case is like trying to untangle a skein of wool in the dark. The trowel, the cyanide, the notes. Everyone's got a motive, and no one's got a solid alibi. Are we any closer to nabbing the culprit?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his confidence. "Mon ami, we are not in the dark, but in the twilight. The clues, the trowel with its green paint, the poisoned brandy, the note about a debt, they are the threads of a tapestry." "Theories on who?" Poirot inclined his head. "Theories, Inspector, are but hypotheses until proven by fact. Let us speak with the household again, but this time we shall apply pressure, no? The liar will falter under scrutiny." The morning's interviews began with Clara Ashford, whose pale face and trembling hands suggested a woman on the edge of collapse. She sat opposite Poirot, her eyes darting nervously to Grayson, who stood by the door, notebook in hand. "Madame," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you have spoken of your husband's habits, his brandy, his privacy. But there is something you have not shared. A fear, perhaps, or a secret from the past?" Clara's lips quivered, and she clutched her handkerchief. I don't know what you mean. I loved Reginald. I would never harm him." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "And yet, madame, you saw a face at the window. A face that caused you to drop the decanter. Was it truly a stranger, or someone you recognized? Someone who frightened you for reasons you cannot yet admit?" Clara's breath caught, and for a moment it seemed she might speak. But she shook her head, tears spilling. "It was a shadow, nothing more. I was mistaken." Poirot dismissed her, but his gaze lingered on the door as she left. "She knows something, Hastings," he murmured. "Not the murder, perhaps, but a piece of the puzzle." Next came Evelyn Ashford, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes defiant but shadowed with worry. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "you mentioned Edward Langley, a suitor your father favored. Why did you reject him? Evelyn's cheeks flushed. He was controlling. Father thought he was respectable, but I saw through him. He left England after we quarrelled years ago. It's nothing to do with this. And yet, Poirot pressed, your father's note spoke of a debt. Could it be a debt to Langley, one he sought to settle? Evelyn's eyes widened, but she shook her head. I don't know. Father never mentioned him again. Major Rutherford followed, his military bearings strained, his mended cuff catching Poirot's eye. Major, Poirot said, your argument with Sir Reginald was heated, oui? Did it concern only your engagement? Or was there another matter, perhaps this old matter mentioned in his appointment book? Rutherford's jaw tightened. I told you, it was about Evelyn. He didn't think I was good enough. I didn't like his tone, but I didn't kill him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the rose bush that tore your calf? Was it near the east wing, perhaps, where the trowel was used? Rutherford paled slightly but recovered. No, it was in the garden. I told you that. The interviews continued, each guest revealing experiments was securely logged. Margaret Hargreaves, her mousy demeanour fraying, admitted to overhearing a heated conversation between Sir Reginald and Victor Crane 2 nights prior, though she claimed not to know the details. Victor Crane himself was next, his sharp features set in a mask of irritation. Monsieur Crane, Poirot said, holding up the appointment book, Sir Reginald met with you at 10 p.m. 2 nights ago. He wished to settle an old matter. What was it? Crane's eyes flickered, but he shrugged. He was vague. Something about a debt from years ago. A personal matter. I told him to put it in writing, but he refused. And the letter addressed to you? Poirot asked, producing the crumpled note. The debt is due. Was this the matter he wished to settle? Crane's fingers tightened on his pen. I don't know. He was in debt to many people. I was just his solicitor. Lillian Vale, the novelist, entered last, her dark eyes meeting Poirot's with a spark of amusement. Monsieur Poirot, she said, you're peeling back the layers of this house like a novel, but have you found the twist yet? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Mademoiselle, every story has its twist, but it is the details that reveal it. Tell me, what have you observed in your writer's notebook? A gesture? A word? A lie? Lillian's smile faded. I've seen Clara glance at the library door, as if expecting someone. I've seen Evelyn and Rutherford whisper when they think no one's watching, and I've seen Crane writing letters late at night, burning the drafts in the fireplace. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Merci, mademoiselle. Your eyes are sharp, as befits a storyteller. After the interviews, Poirot retreated to the morning room, where he spread out his notes and the sketch of the East Wing. Hastings, he said, the lies are surfacing, but they are tangled. Clara's fear, Evelyn's secrecy, Crane's evasions, they all point to a past event, a debt that Sir Reginald sought to settle. And the trowel, with its green paint, was used to mislead us, to suggest an outsider. But the truth lies within these walls. That afternoon, Poirot requested access to Sir Reginald's locked box, which Mrs. Ellis had mentioned. With Lady Beatrice's permission, the desk drawer was opened, revealing a small, ornate box containing a single item, a faded photograph of a young man, his face strikingly similar to Major Rutherford's, but with a cruller set to the mouth. On the back, in Sir Reginald's hand, was written, Edward Langley, 1912. Poirot's lips pursed. Voila, Hastings. The past returns, as it always does. This Langley, he is the key to the debt and perhaps to the murder. As the rain continued to fall, Poirot's little grey cells worked relentless in its approach. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The drizzle that had cloaked Blackthorn Manor for days had thickened into a steady rain, transforming the estate's grounds into a sodden maze of shadows and secrets. Within the house, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, the weight of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder pressing down on every guest like the low grey clouds outside. The library, now Hercule Poirot's sanctuary of deduction, was lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, casting long shadows across the shelves of leather-bound books. Poirot sat at the desk, his notebook open, his green eyes fixed on the faded photograph of Edward Langley, the name scrawled on the back a silent accusation from the past. Captain Hastings, restless as ever, leaned against the mantelpiece, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm. "Poirot," he said, his voice low. "That photograph, it's uncanny how much Langley resembles Rutherford. Do you think there's a connection? And this debt everyone keeps dancing around, what's it all mean?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression one of quiet intensity. "Mon ami, the photograph is not merely a clue. It is a window into the heart of this mystery. The debt, the poison, the staged stabbing, they are all threads woven from a past betrayal. Today we shall pull at these threads until one snaps, revealing the truth." Inspector Grayson entered, his rain-soaked coat dripping onto the carpet, his walrus moustache bristling with frustration. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "my men have questioned the staff again. Nothing new, except the maids swear they saw Clara wandering the east wing before breakfast on the morning of the murder. She's looking guiltier by the minute." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "No, Inspector, Clara is not the murderer, but she is a woman burdened by fear. We must find what frightens her, for it is there we will find the key to this crime." Determined to probe deeper, Poirot requested a private meeting with Clara Ashford in the morning room, away from the prying eyes of the other guests. Clara entered, her pale face drawn, her hands twisting her ever-present handkerchief. She sat, her eyes avoiding Poirot's, as if she feared what he might see. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice gentle but unyielding, "you have withheld something from Hercule Poirot, something that weighs heavily on your heart. The face at the window, the note in your husband's hand, the photograph of Edward Langley. These are not mere coincidences. Tell me, what do you know of this man?" Clara's breath hitched, and for a moment it seemed she might flee. But then, as if a dam had broken, she began to speak, her voice trembling. "Edward Langley. He was a friend of Reginald's years ago, before we married. They were in business together, a shipping venture. But it went wrong." "Threatened Reginald, swore he'd make him pay. I thought he was gone, out of our lives. But last month, Reginald received a letter. It was from Edward, demanding repayment, not just in money, but in honor." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "And this letter, madame? Where is it now?" Clara's hands shook. "Reginald burned it. He said it was nonsense, but I saw the fear in his eyes. And then, the night before he died, I saw that face at the window. It was Edward's, I'm sure of it. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid he'd come for me next." Tears streamed down her face, and Poirot handed her his own silk handkerchief, his expression softening. "Merci, madame. You have been brave to speak. This Langley, he is the shadow that haunts this house, but we must know if he is flesh or phantom." As Clara left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Voilà, mon ami, the emotional turning point. Clara's fear has given us a name, a motive, a past. But is Edward Langley truly here, or is his name a mask for another's vengeance?" Poirot's next move was to confront Victor Crane, whose evasions had grown increasingly suspect. The solicitor entered the library, his sharp features set in a mask of impatience. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot said, holding up the photograph. "You knew Edward Langley, did you not?" He was connected to Sir Reginald's debts, oui? Crane's eyes flickered, but he maintained his composure. I knew of him. Sir Reginald mentioned him once or twice. A failed business partner, nothing more. If you're suggesting I'm involved, you're barking up the wrong tree. And yet, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. Your notes, your late-night letters, your interest in the estate, they suggest a deeper involvement. Tell me, what was the old matter Sir Reginald wished to settle with you? Crane's fingers tightened on his pen, a faint crack betraying his tension. I told you, it was about his will. He wanted to change it, to protect Evelyn's inheritance. He didn't trust Rutherford. Poirot nodded, dismissing him, but his eyes were sharp. Crane is lying, Hastings, but not about everything. He knows more of Langley than he admits. The afternoon brought a new development. Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, approached Poirot with a discovery. A small vial, empty but smelling faintly of almonds, hidden behind a loose panel in the pantry. I found it while cleaning, sir, she said, her voice unsteady. I thought you should know. Poirot examined the vial. His Hastings, but it is not Clara's. Someone wishes us to think so. As evening approached, Poirot requested a private word with Evelyn Ashford, whose guarded demeanour had begun to crack. She entered the library, her auburn hair loose, her green eyes red-rimmed. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, your mother has spoken of Edward Langley, a man your father wronged. You knew him, oui? What can you tell me? Evelyn's hands clenched. I told you. He was a suitor father liked, but I didn't. He was charming at first, but cruel underneath. When I refused him, he left England, vowing revenge. I thought he was gone forever. And your father's fear? Poirot pressed. Did he speak of Langley recently? Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. A month ago. He said someone from the past had written to him, demanding payment. He didn't say who, but I suspected it was Edward. I didn't tell anyone because I was ashamed. I thought my refusal had caused it all. Poirot's voice softened. You are not to blame, mademoiselle, but you must be truthful. Have you seen Langley here? Evelyn shook her head, tears spilling. No, but I feel him like a ghost. I'm so afraid, Monsieur Poirot. As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings. The past is alive, mon ami, and it drives this murder. Langley's shadow looms, but is he the killer? Or is his name a tool for another's vengeance? We are close, Hastings, to the heart of this mystery. The rain continued to fall, a relentless curtain that seemed to seal Blackthorn Manor from the world. Poirot's little grey cells churned, weaving the threads of fear, lies, and betrayal into a pattern that was almost complete. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The rain that had besieged Blackthorn Manor for days showed no sign of relenting. Its ceaseless patter against the windows a grim underscore to the tension within. The grand house, with its oak-panelled rooms and shadowed corridors, seemed to close in on its inhabitants, each of whom carried the weight of suspicion like a millstone. Hercule Poirot, however, was undeterred, his meticulous mind as sharp as the glint of his patent leather shoes. In the library, his sanctuary of deduction, he sat with his notebook open, the photograph of Edward Langley and the vial of cyanide residue before him, silent witnesses to a crime that was nearing its unravelling. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal foil, stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. Poirot, he said, his voice tinged with impatience. We've got the vial, the trowel, the photograph, and all these stories about Langley, but we're still no closer to catching the killer. Everyone's got a secret, and I'm starting to think they're all in on it. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his quiet confidence. Mon ami, the net is tightening. Though the fish may not yet feel it, the secrets are many, but they are connected by a single thread. Edward Langley and the debt he represents. Tonight, we shall set a trap, using the psychology of the guilty to draw them out. Inspector Grayson entered, his walrus moustache damp from a brief foray outside, his expression one of grudging curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "my men have checked the pantry panel where the vial was found. No fingerprints, but it's a loose board, easily accessed by anyone in the house. I still say Clara's our best bet. She was seen near the pantry." Poirot shook his head. "No, Inspector. Clara is a pawn, not a player. The murderer has used her fear to cloud our vision. Tonight, we shall gather all the players in the drawing room, and Hercule Poirot will apply the pressure that makes the guilty falter." Poirot's plan was simple, yet bold. A gathering of the entire household under the pretense of discussing the case's progress, but designed to unsettle the murderer. He instructed Lady Beatrice to summon everyone after dinner, ensuring the setting was formal yet intimate, with the French windows closed to prevent any repeat of the mysterious face that had so frightened Clara. The drawing room, with its heavy drapes and crackling fire, was the perfect stage for Poirot's performance. As the guests assembled, their faces a mixture of apprehension and defiance, Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small stature commanding the room. Lady Beatrice sat near the piano, her silver hair gleaming in the lamplight. Clara Ashford, pale and trembling, clutched her handkerchief, while Evelyn and spectacles glinting. Margaret's hands, twisting nervously. Victor Crane, the solicitor, held his notebook, his pen poised, while Lillian Vale, the novelist, observed the scene with her characteristic intensity. Mrs. Dorothy Winthrop, her sherry glass replaced by tea, fanned herself vigorously. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and precise. "We are gathered to discuss the murder of Sir Reginald Ashford, a crime both cunning and cruel. The cyanide in his brandy, the letter opener in his chest, the note that spoke of a debt. These are not mere acts of violence, but a story of betrayal from the past. And tonight, we shall uncover the author of this story." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, noting every reaction. Clara's hands tightened, Evelyn's breath caught, and Crane's pen paused mid-scratch. "Let us begin with the facts," Poirot continued. "Sir Reginald was poisoned between 8 and 9 in the morning, the cyanide delivered through his brandy. The letter opener, placed after death, was a deception, as was the scratched windowsill, marked by a trowel with green paint. And then there is the photograph of Edward Langley, a man wronged by Sir Reginald years ago, whose name haunts this house." A murmur rippled through the room, and Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Madame Clara," he said, turning to her. "You saw a face at the window, a face you believed to be Langley's. But was it real, or was it a shadow cast to frighten you?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. It looked like him, but it was so quick." Poirot nodded, then turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle, you rejected Edward Langley, a man your father favoured. Did he threaten you or your father when you refused him?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she shook her head. "He was angry, but he left England. I haven't seen him since." "And you, Monsieur Crane," Poirot said, his tone sharpening. "You met with Sir Reginald to discuss an old matter. Was it Langley's debt, or something more personal?" Crane's eyes narrowed. "I told you it was about his will. I don't know anything about Langley." Poirot's gaze shifted to Major Rutherford. "Major, your cuff was torn, mended hastily. Was it truly a rosebush, or were you near the east wing, perhaps using the trowel to stage an intrusion?" Rutherford's jaw clenched. "I told you, it was the garden. You're grasping at straws, Poirot." The room grew tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. And then there is the vial, found in the pantry, smelling of cyanide. A careless mistake or a deliberate one? Someone wished to point us toward Madame Clara, but I say to you, the guilty one is here, in this room, and their heart beats faster with each word around her. But his own face was pale. Lillian Vale's eyes gleamed as if she were watching a play unfold, while Mrs. Winthrop's fan moved faster, her breath coming in short bursts. Poirot stopped, his eyes locking on Victor Crane. Monsieur Crane, you burn letters in the fireplace. You write late into the night. Are these the actions of a solicitor? Or a man hiding a deeper connection to Edward Langley? Crane's pen snapped in his hand, the sound sharp in the silence. This is absurd, he said, his voice tight. I'm here to help the family, not harm them. Poirot smiled faintly. We shall see. But know this, mes amis, the truth cannot hide forever. The little grey cells, they work, and they will not rest until the murderer is revealed. As the guests dispersed, their faces pale and their eyes avoiding one another, Poirot turned to Hastings. The trap is set, mon ami. The guilty one felt the pressure tonight, and soon they will make a mistake. We must watch, and we must listen. The rain continued to fall, a relentless curtain that seemed to seal Blackthorn Manor from the world. Poirot's little grey cells churned, the threads of the mystery drawing tighter, the trap poised to spring. Chapter 10. The Unveiling of Truth. The fifth day at Blackthorn Manor dawned under a sky still heavy with rain, the relentless downpour mirroring the mounting tension within the house. The grand Elizabethan estate, with its ivy-clad walls and shadowed halls, seemed to pulse with secrets, each creak of the floorboards a whisper of guilt. Hercule Poirot, undaunted by the oppressive atmosphere, sat in the library, his notebook filled with meticulous notes, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had finally glimpsed the full pattern of the tapestry he had been weaving. Captain Hastings, pacing as was his wont, paused by the window, peering into the sodden gardens. "Poirot," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and unease. "Last night's gathering rattled them all, didn't it? Crane breaking his pen, Margaret's gasp. I swear you've got the murderer on edge. But who is it? You've got to have a theory by now." Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile enigmatic. "Mon ami, a theory is but a hypothesis until it is proven. The little grey cells have worked tirelessly, and now the threads, Langley, the cyanide, the trowel, the note, they form a picture. Tonight we shall gather the household once more, and Hercule Poirot will reveal the truth, step by step, with logic and precision." Inspector Grayson entered, his walrus moustache damp from the rain, his expression one of grudging anticipation. Poirot does not waste time. He uses it as he uses the little grey cells to uncover what is hidden. Tonight in the drawing room, you shall see the murderer unmasked. The day was spent in quiet preparation. Poirot reviewing his notes and the physical evidence, the vial, the trowel, the photograph of Edward Langley, and the crumpled note that read, "The debt is due." He requested a final inspection of the East Wing bedroom, where he lingered by the desk, his fingers brushing the spot where the locked box had been found. "Hastings," he said softly, "the photograph was not merely a clue. It was a provocation, left to stir fear. But by whom?" As evening fell, the guests were summoned to the drawing room, their faces pale and strained under the weight of Poirot's promised revelation. The room was lit by flickering lamps, the French windows shut tight against the rain, the fire casting shadows that danced like spectres. Lady Beatrice sat by the piano, her silver hair gleaming, her hands clasped tightly. Clara Ashford, pale and trembling, sat beside Evelyn, whose auburn hair was loose, her green eyes wary. Major Rutherford, his jaw set, stood near Evelyn, his mended cuff barely visible. Dr. Hargreaves and Margaret sat close, the doctor's spectacles glinting, his wife's hands twisting nervously. Victor Crane clutched his notebook, his sharp features tense, while Lillian Vale's dark eyes watched the scene with quiet intensity. Mrs. Winthrop, her fan moving furiously, sipped her tea with a trembling hand. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, standing before the fireplace, his small stature commanding the room. We are here to solve the murder of Sir Reginald Ashford, a crime of poison and deception. The cyanide in his brandy, the letter opener in his chest, the note about a debt, these were not random acts, but a carefully woven plan, undone by the smallest details. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us begin with the method. Sir Reginald was poisoned with cyanide, administered through his brandy between 8 and 9 in the morning. The letter opener placed after death was a theatrical flourish, meant to suggest a violent struggle. The trowel, with its green paint, scratched the windowsill to imply an intruder. But these were distractions, designed to obscure the truth. Poirot turned to Clara. Madame Clara, you saw a face at the window, a face you believed to be Edward Langley's. But it was not Langley, was it? It was a mask, a shadow cast to frighten you, to make you believe an outsider was responsible. Clara's eyes, everything. The note, the debt is due, was a reminder of that betrayal. But Langley is not here. He is a ghost, conjured by the murderer to confuse us. A murmur rippled through the room, and Poirot raised a hand. Let us consider the timeline. Sir Reginald was last seen alive at breakfast, at 8:30. He retired to his room, where he was poisoned. The alibis are tight, but one person had the opportunity, the motive, and the means. He turned to Victor Crane, whose pen had stopped scratching. Monsieur Crane, you are not merely a solicitor. You are Edward Langley's brother, are you not? The resemblance in the photograph is subtle, but it is there. The same sharp features, the same cold eyes. You came to Blackthorn Manor not to advise Sir Reginald, but to exact revenge for your brother's ruin. Crane's face paled, his notebook falling to the floor. That's preposterous, he snapped. I'm Victor Crane, a solicitor. I have no brother. Poirot's smile was cold. No, monsieur. Your real name is Victor Langley. You changed it to gain Sir Reginald's trust, to infiltrate his household. You knew of his debts, his guilt, and you used it. The cyanide was yours, hidden in the pantry, accessible to you as you moved freely through the house. The trowel, taken from the shed, was your tool to stage the intrusion. And the note, the debt is due, was your signature, a final taunt to the man who destroyed your brother. The room was silent, all eyes on Crane. He stood, his hands trembling. You have no proof, he said, his voice hoarse. Poirot produced the appointment book. Sir Reginald met with V.C. 2 nights ago to settle an old matter. That matter was your brother's ruin. And your letters, burned in the fireplace, contained drafts of the anonymous notes, written in the same jagged script. Lillian Vale saw you burning them, did she not? Lillian nodded, her eyes wide. I did. Late at night in the library. Crane's composure cracked, his shoulders sagging. It's true, he whispered.
Reginald ruined Edward, drove him to despair. He fled to Australia, broken. I swore I'd make Reginald pay. The cyanide was easy. I slipped it into the decanter the night before. I didn't mean for Clara to be blamed, but I had to make it look like an outsider.
Grayson stepped forward, handcuffs in hand. Victor Crane, or Langley, you're under arrest for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashford. As Crane was led away, the room erupted in murmurs, relief mingling with shock. Poirot turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming. The little grey cells, mon ami, they never fail. The truth had been cast pale light across the sodden lawns. The revelation of Victor Crane's guilt, or rather Victor Langley's, had lifted the oppressive weight from the house. Yet a sombre air lingered, as if the walls themselves mourned the tragedy that had unfolded. Hercule Poirot, his task complete, sat in the library, his notebook closed, his tisane steaming gently beside him. His green eyes, usually so sharp, held a contemplative softness, as though he were turning over not just the facts of the case, but the deeper truths of the human heart. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, sat opposite him, his face a mixture of relief and lingering unease. I say, Poirot, he said, stirring his tea, you've done it again. Unmasked the blighter right in front of us all. But I must confess, I didn't see Crane as Langley until you laid it out. How do you do it, old chap? How do you always know? Poirot's moustache curved in a faint, melancholic smile. Mon ami, it is not a matter of knowing, but of seeing. The little grey cells, they observe, they connect, they deduce, but more than that, they understand the passions that drive men to such acts: greed, pride, vengeance. Victor Langley was consumed by the last of these, a fire that burned for years until it consumed Sir Reginald as well. Inspector Grayson entered, his walrus moustache less bristling now, his demeanour softened by the resolution of the case. Monsieur Poirot, he said, extending a hand, I'll admit, I had my doubts about your methods, but you've proved me wrong. Langley's confessed everything. Motive, means, the lot. He's being taken to London for trial. You've saved us a deal of trouble. Poirot inclined his head, accepting the handshake with a graceful nod. Inspector, it is the duty of Hercule Poirot to bring order to chaos, to find truth where lies abound. But, I confess, this case leaves a taste most bitter. Vengeance is a poison, not unlike the cyanide that killed Sir Reginald. Grayson departed to oversee the final arrangements, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. The library, with its heavy drapes and rows of leather-bound books, seemed quieter now, as if the house itself exhaled in relief. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled, his eyes distant. Hastings, he said softly, this case, it reminds us of the fragility of human bonds. Sir Reginald wronged Edward Langley, yes, but he also loved his family in his imperfect way. And Victor, in seeking justice for his brother, became the very thing he despised, a destroyer of lives, though his grief led him to murder.
The little grey cells, they solve the crime, but they cannot heal the heart.
Their conversation was interrupted by Lady Beatrice, who entered the library with a quiet dignity, her silver hair impeccable despite the strain of the past days. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady but warm, I cannot thank you enough. You have saved my family from further ruin, though the cost has been great. I should have told you more about Reginald's past, about Langley. I was afraid it would tear us apart. Poirot rose, bowing slightly. Madame, fear is a powerful force, but truth is stronger. You protected your family as best you could. Now you must rebuild, with honesty as your foundation. Lady Beatrice nodded, her eyes glistening. You are right, of course. Evelyn and Charles will marry, despite Reginald's objections. And Clara, she is stronger than she seems. We will endure. As she left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression resolute. It is time for us to depart, mon ami. Blackthorn Manor has no more secrets for Hercule Poirot to uncover. They gathered their belongings, and by noon the sleek Rolls-Royce was waiting at the front of the manor, Perkins at the wheel. The guests, gathered on the steps to bid them farewell, were a study in contrasts. Clara, pale but composed, her hand resting on Evelyn's arm, Evelyn and Major Rutherford standing close, their faces hopeful yet shadowed, Dr. Hargreaves and Margaret subdued but relieved, Lillian Vale, her notebook tucked away, a faint smile on her lips, and Mrs. Winthrop, her fan still fluttering, though her sherry glass had returned. The absence of Victor Crane was a silent testament to the justice Poirot had wrought. As the car pulled away, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its stone facade softened by the lifting mist. What a place, he said. Beautiful, but full of ghosts. Do you think they'll ever be free of them, Poirot? Poirot's eyes followed the receding manor, his voice low but certain. Ghosts, Hastings, are but memories we choose to carry. The Ashfords will heal in time if they choose truth over secrets. As for Hercule Poirot, he moves on to the next puzzle, for there will always be another. The car wound through the Kentish lanes, the countryside unfolding in a patchwork of green and gold under the clearing sky. Poirot leaned back, his hands folded, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The case of Blackthorn Manor was closed, but the world with its endless complexities awaited the little grey cells. Chapter 12. A new shadow emerges. The departure from Blackthorn Manor should have marked the end of the affair, with Victor Langley's confession and arrest tying the case of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder in a neat bow. An otherwise harmonious symphony. The rain had ceased, and the Kentish countryside sparkled under a tentative sun, but Poirot's green eyes were distant, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on his knee. Hastings, ever attuned to his friend's moods, glanced at him from the opposite seat. I say, Poirot, he ventured, you've got that look again. The case is solved, isn't it? Langley's confessed, Grayson's got his man, and we're off to London for a well-earned rest. Why do you look like you've just found a fly in your tisane? Poirot's moustache twitched, but his smile was tinged with disquiet. Mon ami, the confession of Victor Langley is satisfactory, oui. But it is too neat, too complete. The little grey cells, they whisper that we have seen only part of the picture. There is a shadow, Hastings, one that we have not yet illuminated. Before Hastings could press further, the car slowed, and Perkins, the chauffeur, called out, "Beg pardon, sirs, but there's a cyclist on the road, signalling us to stop." Poirot's eyes sharpened as the car pulled to the side of the narrow lane. A young woman, her coat mud-splattered, dismounted her bicycle and approached, clutching a sealed envelope. "Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice breathless. "I'm Jenny, one of the maids at Blackthorn Manor. Mrs. Ellis sent me. She found this in the library, hidden in a book, and thought you should have it." Poirot took the envelope, his gloved fingers breaking the seal with care. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its script jagged but distinct, identical to the anonymous notes. The debt is not paid. Another will fall. Poirot's lips pursed, and he handed the note to Hastings, who read it with a start. "Good Lord, Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed. "Another threat? But Langley's in custody. Who could have written this?" Poirot's gaze was fixed on the horizon, where Blackthorn Manor's chimneys were just visible. Précisément, mon ami. The confession of Langley was meant to close the book, but this note, it opens a new chapter. We must return to the manor at once. Perkins turned the car around, and within the hour they were back at Blackthorn Manor, the house looming under the now cloudy sky. Lady Beatrice met them at the door, her face pale with surprise. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, what brings you back? I thought the matter was settled." Poirot held up the note, his expression grave. "Madame, a new threat has emerged, one that suggests the danger is not past. I must speak with the—"
Mrs. Winthrop's fan moved furiously, her tea untouched. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, standing before the fireplace, "the arrest of Victor Langley was but a step in this mystery, not its end. This note, found today, speaks of another death, another victim. Someone in this house seeks to continue what Langley began, or perhaps to use his crime as a mask for their own." A gasp rippled through the room, and Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Another murder," she whispered. "But why? Who?" Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting every reaction. "That is what we must discover. Let us review the facts. Langley poisoned Sir Reginald, driven by vengeance for his brother Edward, but this note, written in the same hand, suggests a deeper conspiracy, or a copycat. Madame Clara, you feared Langley's return. Have you received any other letters?" Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, nothing. I thought it was over." Poirot turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of Langley's cruelty. Did he ever contact you after leaving England?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she shook her head. "No, I told you he was gone." Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Hargreaves. "Doctor, your medical supplies included cyanide. Was any missing before Sir Reginald's death?" Hargreaves bristled. "I told you, my supplies are locked. I checked them after the murder. Nothing was missing." Margaret Hargreaves, her voice barely audible, added, "It's true. I saw him check." Poirot nodded, then turned to Lillian Vale. "Mademoiselle, you are a writer, a student of human nature. Have you seen anything at all, that suggests another hand at work?" Lillian's dark eyes met his, a flicker of hesitation in them. I've noticed Margaret looking anxious, more than usual. And Major Rutherford, he's been checking the windows at night as if he expects something." Rutherford's jaw tightened. "I'm a military man, Miss Vale. I check my surroundings. It's habit, not guilt." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Habits, Major, can reveal much. And you, Madame Winthrop, you are fond of gossip. Have you heard whispers of another threat?" Mrs. Winthrop's fan paused, her eyes wide. I heard Clara talking to herself in the conservatory yesterday. She said, it's not over, but I thought she meant her grief." Poirot's lips pursed, and he turned to Clara. "Madame, what did you mean by it's not over?" Clara's face crumpled, tears spilling. "I meant assisting."
Poirot focused on the library where the note had been found. Behind a row of books, he discovered a small, locked diary, its leather cover worn. With Lady Beatrice's permission, it was opened, revealing entries in Sir Reginald's hand, detailing his guilt over Edward Langley's ruin and a fear of another who knows. The final entry, dated the night before his death, read, "I must face it. The past cannot be buried. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Hastings," he murmured. "Sir Reginald knew his death was near, but not from Langley alone. There is another player, one who hides in plain sight." As night fell, the house was on edge, the guests avoiding one another's eyes. Poirot, undaunted, prepared for the next act, his little grey cells working tirelessly to uncover the new shadow that threatened Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 13. The Second Conspiracy. The seventh bay at Blackthorn Manor brought a deceptive calm, the rain having dwindled to a faint mist that clung to the estate's ancient stones like a lingering doubt. The discovery of the new threatening note, "The debt is not paid, another will fall," had shattered the fragile relief that followed Victor Langley's arrest, casting the household into a renewed spiral of fear and suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his mind as sharp as ever, stood in the library, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes fixed on the diary of Sir Reginald Ashford, its final entry a haunting confession of guilt and foreboding. Captain Hastings, his usual restlessness tempered by unease, leaned against the library desk, his brow furrowed. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "this new note changes everything. Langley's locked up, so who's behind this? Are we dealing with a copycat? Or was there a second killer all along? It's enough to make a chap's head spin." Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression one of quiet determination. "Mon ami, the head must not spin, but focus. The note is no mere echo of Langley's crime. It is a continuation, a thread from the same tapestry. The little grey cells tell me that Sir Reginald's death was but the first act, and another seeks to complete the drama. We must uncover this second conspirator before they strike again." Inspector Grayson entered, his walrus moustache bristling with frustration. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "my men have searched every inch of the manor for more notes or clues. Nothing yet, but the staff are jumpy, and the guests are at each other's throats. If there's another killer, we need to find them fast. Any ideas?" Poirot inclined his head, his tone measured. "Inspector, the ideas are many, but the truth is singular. The diary of Sir Reginald speaks of another who knows, a shadow beyond Langley. Today, we shall..." Keen observations had proven valuable. The novelist entered the library, her dark eyes sharp, her demeanour calm but alert. "Mademoiselle Vale," Poirot began, "you see this house as a story, oui? You have noted Margaret's anxiety, Rutherford's vigilance. But tell me, have you seen anything that suggests a second hand, working with or against Victor Langley?" Lillian's lips curved in a faint smile. "You're a storyteller yourself, Monsieur Poirot, weaving clues into a narrative. I've seen Margaret whispering to Dr. Hargreaves, late at night, in the conservatory. She seemed terrified, not just nervous. And Major Rutherford, he checks the windows, yes, but he also lingers near the east wing, as if watching for something." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your eyes miss little. And have you written anything in your notebook that might illuminate this shadow?" Lillian hesitated, then nodded. "I wrote down a conversation I overheard 2 nights before Sir Reginald's death. It was between him and Dr. Hargreaves in the study. Sir Reginald said, 'You know what happened back then. If it comes out, we're all ruined.' Hargreaves told him to keep quiet, that it was buried." Poirot's lips pursed. "Most interesting. Merci, mademoiselle." Next, Poirot summoned Dr. Hargreaves, whose scholarly air was strained, his spectacles glinting nervously. "Doctor," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding, You spoke with Sir Reginald about a secret from the past, one that could ruin you all. What was it? And how does it connect to Edward Langley? Hargreaves' face paled, his hands fidgeting.
I don't know what you mean. Sir Reginald was my patient, nothing more. We discussed his health, his habits.
Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. Non, docteur. You discussed a secret, one tied to Langley's ruin. The diary confirms it. Speak, or the little grey cells will uncover it without your aid. Hargreaves' composure cracked, his voice low.
It was a business deal. Years ago. Reginald, Langley, and I were partners in a shipping venture. Reginald manipulated the books, cheated Langley out of his share. I knew, but I said nothing. I was young, ambitious, afraid of losing my position. Langley swore revenge, and now it's come back. Poirot nodded, dismissing him.
The past is never buried.
Margaret produced a crumpled sheet, its script matching the threatening note. I hid it in my jewelry box. I thought it was a prank, but now… Poirot examined the letter, his expression grave. This is no prank, madame. It is a promise. The afternoon was spent searching the East Wing, where Rutherford's lingering had been noted. Poirot, accompanied by Hastings and Grayson, found a small scrap of paper tucked behind a picture frame in the corridor, its jagged script unmistakable. The truth will out. Poirot's lips pursed. Another clue, Hastings, but not from Langley. This is the work of someone within, someone who knows the secret and seeks to exploit it. That evening, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, the fire casting flickering shadows across their anxious faces. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, the murder of Sir Reginald was but the beginning. A new threat looms, tied to a secret from years past, a shipping venture that ruined Edward Langley, known to Sir Reginald and Dr. Hargreaves. The notes, the threats, they come from one who seeks to punish, not just for Langley, but for their own reasons. He turned to Margaret Hargreaves, holding up a letter. Madame, this was meant to frighten you, to keep the secret buried, but it has done the opposite. It has brought it to light. Margaret gasped, her hands flying to her face. Dr. Hargreaves stood, his voice sharp. Leave her alone, Poirot. She's done nothing. Poirot's gaze shifted to Rutherford. And you, Major, you linger near the East Wing, watching. Are you protecting Evelyn or hiding your own involvement? Rutherford's jaw clenched. I'm no killer. I check the windows because I don't trust this house. Not after what happened. The room was tense, the air thick with fear. Poirot paced, his voice calm but commanding. The second conspirator is here, among us. They know the secret. They use Langley's methods, but their motive is their own. Tomorrow we shall uncover them, for the little grey cells never rest. As the guests dispersed, their faces pale, Poirot turned to Hastings. The net tightens, mon ami. The second shadow is close, and they will not escape. The mist outside thickened, sealing Blackthorn Manor in a cocoon of secrets as Poirot's mind worked tirelessly to unmask the final conspirator. Chapter 14. The Final Confrontation. The 8th day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a fragile stillness, the mist that had enveloped the estate giving way to a pale, watery sunlight that did little to dispel the chill of suspicion within. The discovery of the new threatening notes and Sir Reginald Ashford's diary had deepened the mystery, revealing a second conspirator whose motives remained shrouded. Hercule Poirot, his mind a crucible of logic and intuition, case Langley's vengeance, the cyanide, the staged clues, and the shadow of a shared secret were weaving into a final, intricate pattern. Captain Hastings, his usual restlessness now tinged with anticipation, sat by the fireplace,
his hands clasped. "Poirot," he said, his voice low but eager. "You've got that look, the one that means you're about to spring the trap. This second conspirator, do you know who it is? I'm still reeling from Langley's confession, and now this." Poirot's moustache twitched, his smile both confident and enigmatic. "Mon ami, the little grey cells have been busy, and they have not been idle. The notes, the diary, the fear in this house, they point to one who hides behind the chaos of Langley's crime. Today, we shall confront this shadow, and the truth will stand revealed." Inspector Grayson entered, his walrus moustache less bristling, his demeanour softened by Poirot's relentless progress. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "my men found nothing new in the search. But the staff report Margaret Hargreaves acting strangely, wandering the corridors at night, muttering to herself. You said we'd have the second killer today. I'm counting on you." Poirot inclined his head. "Inspector, Hercule Poirot does not disappoint. Tonight we shall gather the household once more, and the guilty will have nowhere to hide." Poirot spent the morning reviewing the evidence, the vial of cyanide residue, the trowel with green paint, the photograph of Edward Langley, and the new notes, each written in the same jagged script as Langley's. The diary's final entry, "I must face it, the past cannot be buried," echoed in his mind, a testament to Sir Reginald's awareness of a looming threat beyond Langley. Poirot's fingers tapped a precise rhythm on the desk as he murmured, "The second conspirator knew of Langley's plan, and they used it. But for what purpose? Revenge? Or something deeper?" His first move was to speak privately with Margaret Hargreaves, whose nervous demeanour had drawn suspicion. She entered the library, her hands twisting, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice gentle but probing, "you received a note that said, 'You're next.' You knew of your husband's secret, his role in Edward Langley's ruin. Did you fear for your life or for another's?" Margaret's breath hitched, tears spilling. I was terrified. Lionel told me about the shipping venture, how Reginald cheated Langley. I thought it was over, but then the notes came, and I heard whispers in the house, someone watching, waiting. I didn't know what to do." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And these whispers, madame, did you recognize a voice, a name?" Margaret shook her head, her voice barely audible. "No, but I saw someone near the east," dismissed her, his mind racing. "A shadow, Hastings," he said, "but not Langley's. Someone used his name, his methods to mask their own intent." Next, Poirot summoned Major Rutherford, whose vigilance had been noted by Lillian Vale. The Major entered, his military bearing strained, his mended cuff catching the light. "Major," Poirot said, "you watch the windows, the east wing. Are you protecting Mademoiselle Evelyn or concealing your own actions?" Rutherford's jaw clenched. "I told you, I'm cautious by nature. This house isn't safe, not after what happened." "And yet," Poirot pressed, "you were seen near the east wing the night before the murder. Were you checking windows or perhaps placing a trowel, a note?" Rutherford's face reddened. "That's nonsense. I was with Evelyn, in the garden, as I told you." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Major. We shall see." As evening approached, Poirot requested a final gathering in the drawing room, the stage for his ultimate confrontation. The guests assembled, their faces pale and drawn. Lady Beatrice, composed but weary, Clara, clutching her handkerchief, Evelyn and Rutherford, their hands brushing. Dr. Hargreaves and Margaret, tense and silent. Lillian Vale, her eyes sharp, and Mrs. Winthrop, her fan fluttering. The fire crackled, casting shadows that seemed to dance with the ghosts of the past. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, standing before the fireplace, his voice clear and commanding. "The murder of Sir Reginald Ashford was the work of Victor Langley, driven by vengeance for his brother Edward. But another hand has stirred the waters,
leaving notes to frighten and confuse. This second conspirator knew of Langley's plan and used it to pursue their own ends. He held up the latest note. "The debt is not paid. Another will fall." This was written after Langley's arrest, in his script, but not by his hand. It was meant to keep the secret of the shipping venture buried, to protect another who shared Sir Reginald's guilt. Poirot turned to Dr. Hargreaves. "Doctor, you were part of the venture that ruined Edward Langley. You knew of Reginald's deceit, yet you remained silent. But someone else knew, someone who sought to punish you both." Hargreaves' spectacles glinted, his voice sharp. "I've admitted my part, but I didn't kill anyone." Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret. "Madame Hargreaves, you were terrified, not just for yourself, but for your husband. You saw a shadow, you heard whispers, but you also acted, oui? You wrote the notes, copying Langley's script to frighten the household into silence, to protect your husband's secret." Margaret gasped, her hands flying to her face. "No, I couldn't." Poirot's voice was relentless. "You found Langley's drafts in the
vial in the pantry, the shadow in the east wing. These were your attempts to mimic Langley's methods, to keep the truth buried." Margaret collapsed into sobs, her husband's arm around her.
"I did it for Lionel," she cried. "I knew he'd be ruined if the truth came out. I didn't kill Reginald, but I wrote the notes, yes. I was so afraid."
The room was silent, the guests stunned. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Madame, your fear led you to deceive, but not to murder. The true killer was Langley, but your actions clouded the truth." Grayson stepped forward, his notebook open. "Mrs. Hargreaves, you'll need to come with us for questioning. This is serious business." As Margaret was led away, her husband following, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The tapestry is complete, mon ami. Langley's vengeance, Margaret's desperation. They wove a web of lies, but the little grey cells have unraveled it." The fire flickered, the shadows retreating, as Blackthorn Manor exhaled its final secret. Chapter 15. The Final Curtain. The 9th day at Blackthorn Manor broke with a clarity that seemed to cleanse the estate of its lingering shadows. The mist had lifted, and the sun, though pale, bathed the ancient stones in a soft, golden light, as if nature itself sought to signal the end of the grim drama that had unfolded within. Hercule Poirot, his task complete, stood in the library, his notebook closed, his patent leather shoes gleaming as brightly as his satisfaction in unravelling the tangled threads of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder and the subsequent conspiracy. The air was lighter, the oppressive weight of secrets lifted, yet a quiet melancholy hung over the house, a reminder of the cost of truth. Captain Hastings, ever the mirror to Poirot's brilliance, sat by the fireplace, his tea untouched, his face a mixture of awe and relief. "Poirot," he said, his voice warm with admiration, "you've done it again. 2 culprits unmasked. Langley for the murder, and Margaret Hargreaves for those wretched notes. I never would have pegged her for it, though I suppose her fear makes sense. But are you sure that's the end of it? No more shadows lurking?" Poirot's moustache curved in a faint, reflective smile. "Mon ami, the shadows are banished when the light of truth shines upon them. Victor Langley's vengeance and Margaret Hargreaves' desperation were the twin threads of this mystery. The little grey cells have traced them to their source, and now Blackthorn Manor may heal. But the heart, Hastings, it carries scars that logic cannot erase." Inspector Grayson entered, his walrus moustache less bristling, his demeanour softened. "Charges for obstruction. Langley's on his way to trial in London. You've tied this up neater than a Christmas parcel. Poirot shook the inspector's hand, his expression gracious, but tinged with solemnity. Inspector, it is the duty of Hercule Poirot to restore order where chaos reigns. But this case, it reminds us that order comes at a price. Vengeance and fear, they are poisons as deadly as cyanide. Grayson nodded, then departed to finalize his report, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone in the library. The room, with its rows of leather-bound books and heavy drapes, seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Poirot leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, his eyes distant. "Hastings," he said softly, "this affair began with a debt from the past, a wrong committed by Sir Reginald against Edward Langley. It ended with two souls lost to their own passions, Langley to revenge, Margaret to fear. It is a lesson, no? That the past, if not confronted, will always return." Hastings frowned, stirring his tea absently. "But you confronted it, Poirot. You brought the truth out, saved the Ashfords from more harm. Surely that's a victory." Poirot's gaze softened, a rare glimpse of his philosophical core. "A victory, oui, but a bitter-sweet one. Clara mourns a husband, Evelyn a father, Lady Beatrice a brother, and Margaret, though she meant no death, will carry the weight of her actions. The little grey cells solve the crime, but they cannot mend the broken heart." Their conversation was interrupted by Lady Beatrice, who entered with a quiet grace, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady but warm, "I owe you more than I can express. You have saved my family from ruin, though the cost has been heavy. I should have spoken sooner of Reginald's past, of the shipping venture. My silence enabled this tragedy." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Madame, you protected those you love, as any sister would. The fault lies not with you, but with those who chose vengeance over forgiveness. Now you must rebuild, with truth as your cornerstone." Lady Beatrice's eyes glistened, but she nodded. "You are right. Evelyn and Charles will marry, and Clara is finding her strength. We will move forward, thanks to you." As she left, Evelyn and Major Rutherford appeared at the door, their hands clasped, their faces hopeful yet shadowed. "Monsieur Poirot," Evelyn said, her green eyes bright. "We're grateful. You've given us a chance to start anew, though I'll never forget Father." Rutherford nodded, his material for a dozen novels, Monsieur Poirot. I hope our paths cross again. Mrs. Winthrop, her fan still, but her sherry glass returned, dabbed at her eyes. "Such a dreadful business. But you've made it right, monsieur. Godspeed." By noon, the Rolls-Royce stood ready, Perkins at the wheel. The guests gathered on the steps, their faces a tapestry of gratitude and grief. Poirot and Hastings climbed into the car, the manor receding as they wound through the Kentish lanes, the countryside unfolding in a patchwork of green and gold under the clearing sky. Hastings glanced back, his voice soft. "What a place, Poirot. Beautiful, but haunted. Do you think they'll ever be free of it?" Poirot's eyes followed the manor's fading silhouette, his voice low but certain. "Haunted? Oui, but not forever. The Ashfords will heal, as all must, by facing the truth. As for Hercule Poirot, he moves on to the next puzzle. For the world is full of mysteries, and the little grey cells, they never rest." The car sped toward Thornfield Halt, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows that seemed to follow, but could not overtake, the indomitable spirit of the little Belgian detective.